Let me just finish, please.
Okay. Hey guys, I'm his wife.
Naked wife.
Don't put that on the ground.
Yeah, that's going in. Hi guys, welcome back. As you can see, I've made an effort. I've got some flowers out for you, so hopefully you can enjoy those while I speak to you about business. So this week I've got tons of notes because I don't want to miss anything. And this is a video about when you start your first contract. So congratulations, you've got your first contract. That in itself is a massive success. And now it's about what do you do on the first day. So I've written some notes here and I'm just going to go bit by bit through them, and hopefully some of these things will be helpful to you. Obviously I am just coming from 2 contracts and I have a little bit of information that may or may not be helpful, but what I thought I'd do is collate it now because I don't want to miss out on forgetting some of this stuff that might be useful for you too. So the first thing you'll do on your first day is you're probably going to set up a laptop if they give you a laptop, or you will be using your own laptop. And you'll have lots of applications to install and lots of usernames, passwords, and all sorts. So what I've started to do is write a crib sheet of all the things I do to set up a client laptop to be in the way that I like to work. So that'll be applications that I install or some additional settings that I change, like adding right click to my mouse because I'm using a Mac sometimes. So there's lots of detail in there about what I do step by step. And now I use this document. Every time I go somewhere new, I use that document to get going. So when you're using applications, you'll probably also need to ask who's the person to contact about licenses. So you'll probably need licenses for some of the applications you use, and it's important to know who that person is so you can email them or send invoices over to them if you're buying something on their behalf as well. The next thing to do is about the management and the hierarchy of the company. It's important to see or find out who those stakeholders are, who your management are, so your line manager. If there are product owners, find out who they are, like head of development, and see if you can meet with the kind of the key zones of managers or product or engineering, just so you can get to know them, get to know their processes. One really good thing that I've started to do is ask specifically my line manager, in what way do they prefer to be communicated with? So do they prefer me to ping little messages over whatever communication tool they use? So predominantly that'll be Slack or Hangouts. Or do they prefer me just talking to them, like turning around and talking to them if they're in the room? Or do they prefer me booking out specific kind of hour slots or half an hour slots with them? And it was surprising actually, my most recent manager was surprised because she'd never had anyone ask her that question before. So it's a nice little tip to do. People rarely do it, but if you do ask, it is just ultimately going to help you work in a more efficient way with your colleagues and with the senior management as well. So that's a little tip that's super helpful. Next, I've written down hours. So it's important to know if you want to start a little bit earlier, make sure that if you're wanting to get in for 9 or half 8, make sure you tell them that that's what you're wanting to do and okay that with management. If you're also wanting to stay a little bit later and arrive a little bit later, just check that out with them as well. If you're staying a little bit later, just double check that you're not going to get locked in or locked out. Sometimes these buildings have cut-off points at like 7 o'clock. They don't want anyone back in the building or something like that. So check on hours as well. And then also measurements of success is the next point that I've written down. So with your line manager, just make sure that you are real clear with how they measure success. So is it that you're interviewing lots of individuals through your user interviews? Is it that you're producing lots of documentation? Is it that you're kind of producing wireframes within a week rather than in a month? Or just iron out all the detail of what are they expecting from you. It's so you can just do a better job, and that there's no confusion, that you're managing the expectations of both yourself, what you're going to kind of put pressure on yourself to do, but also managing their expectations of you as well. Next is about invoicing. It's an important part of contracting, is making sure you do get paid. Now there's 2 routes. The first route is if you've come through a recruiter, you'll probably invoice them. They'll give you a timesheet that you add in your hours and the days you've worked, get your line manager to sign, then you'll take a photo or scan it, send it to your recruiter along with an invoice that you have. Just make sure that when you're sending it, that you just double check that you've ticked all the boxes, that you've included VAT and certain things like that, and made sure you've got the signed time sheets from your manager. It's important when you're starting out with the first couple of invoices just to double check to make sure that you've fulfilled everything that they've asked for, and that they don't have, or they're not waiting on you for anything, because ultimately you're the one that may or may not miss out, because you might not get paid if they don't have all the right information. Secondly, if you're working in-house with a client and you're directly invoicing them, again, finance teams have very different systems and very different protocols. The particular one that I'm working with now had a supplier's form that I had to fill out before they would even pay my invoices. So even though I sent my invoices, I needed to fill in some extra additional paperwork for them specifically so that I would get paid. So it's always good to chase up that first invoice. Once you've been paid once, it's pretty much going to be certain you'll be paid again. Again, the timescales for things. So a recruiter, sometimes you'll be able to go as quick as a week. So you'll invoice every week and get paid every week, which is great. Sometimes it will be in-house. For me, it's being paid every 2 weeks, which is still great. I still invoice every week because I don't want to kind of allow it to build up and invoice a month at a time. I much prefer having that regular payment coming in, and it makes sure that I'm able to calculate what days I was there or wasn't there in a much easier way, rather than having to remember anything additional. An extra thing with that is sometimes they have additional internal timesheets or timekeeping systems. Again, make sure you've got the right projects that you're working on within your timesheet so you're able to add time. And it's super helpful if you just do it for a couple of days and check with either your line manager or some of the resource management to make sure you're doing it in the right way. It's nothing worse than being kind of told off a week later or 2 weeks later, when it's just worth checking in early to get things right from the off. Then it's about process. So not only did I say meet with management and your teams, it's really important to just work out what they do, what their process is, and how you can align yourself to fit in with that, whether or not that's your own team or whether or not it's a broader kind of product life cycle and where you can see that you fit in. And also ask about their expectations of your role as well. In particular with devs, sometimes developers have gripes about the certain way that designers put things together. Designers overly use gradients or images or something, and it's bloating in the application or something like that. That's an example. So it's always important to go and speak to your developers as well to make sure that they're on your side, that you understand what they're looking for from your role as well. Again, most of this is very UX focused, but still, if you're working in a different team, always kind of work out the food chain, or work out the chain of who do you pass on to, whether or not you can speak to them to work out in a ways. Another thing would be introduce yourself to some of the developers. For me as a UXer, I pass a lot of my work on to a team of developers, and it's really important to find out what they find is important and their expectations of what I hand over. Sometimes in UX and development, developers specifically have priorities of a fast application, loading speeds and such things like that. But as a designer, I might be thinking, oh, it needs to be elaborate, it needs to be delightful, and I'm using lots of gradients and lots of shadows and stuff. When it comes down to a developer, they'll be wanting to simplify things and keep it a little bit simpler. My wife is knocking at the door.
5 hours later.
Another important thing about being in a team is leading from the bottom as well. If you find that there's a process that is missing, or that you require something from a manager or another member of another team, it's important to make sure you either flag that or start to create some of that process. Obviously, you don't want to step on people's toes, so make sure you're doing it in a way that's quite transparent and always convey the effectiveness or the improvement that it will bring to your process or to the team. Then it's about a paper trail of the things that you work on. You might have a task board, and it's important just to keep logging in so your management can see a sense of transparency of what you're working on, what you get stuck on, what you're working on today, what you're working on tomorrow. And I think it's important as well to always repeat back the expectations. So if someone says, hey, can I do this task? It'll be a quick one. Always repeat back, okay, so you want me to do X, Y, and Z, and when is the deadline? And try and make sure that you manage their expectations, especially if it's somewhere that doesn't quite have the process, or whether or not you're the one and only UX designer as well. Sometimes they'll come to you and ask you to do little tasks, but it's important to kind of work out deadlines for those little tasks because they soon pile up. and yeah, you don't want anyone to be unhappy with the fact that you've missed their deadline or not been able to produce the work in the time.
Hey guys, I'm his wife.
Finally, once you're coming to the end of your first contract, and hopefully it's gone really, really well and you've enjoyed it, then once you've come to the end of your 3-month or 6-month, it would be good to think about the recommendation from your client. So hopefully you've done a good job, they're really pleased with you. So either go for a LinkedIn recommendation that you can send once you have befriended them or connected with them, you can send a recommendation or a request for a recommendation. Or it might be worth just getting it written down in an email. You can then use that on your CV or your website to promote the fact that you did a really good job when you were hired for these clients. So that's it. It's an onslaught of information, I know, but hopefully these little tips will help you to just fulfill that first contract, and that is one contract of many contracts as well. So that was a lot of information to take in, but hopefully some of that will be helpful for your contracting life or for the contracting life you're going to step into. As always, feel free to add comments or ask questions. I'm always going to just be able to help with my experience, so I don't know everything, but hopefully some of what I've said has been helpful to you today. Anyway, I'll see you next time, and good luck with the contracting.